ਦੱਸ ਸਕਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਕੱਲ ਦੁਪਹਿਰ ਰੂਸੀ ਸੰਘ ਅਤੇ ਯੂਕਰੇਨ ਦੇ ਸਥਾਈ ਮਿਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਪੱਤਰ ਸੌਂਪੇ ਗਏ ਹਨ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਪੱਤਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਕੱਤਰ ਜਨਰਲ ਨੇ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰਪਤੀ ਵਿਲੋਦਮੀਰ ਪੁਤਿਨ ਮਾਸਕੋ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਤੇ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰਪਤੀ ਵਿਲੋਦਮੀਰ ਜ਼ੈਲੈਂਸਕੀ ਨੂੰ ਉਸਦੇ ਕੀਵ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕਿਹਾ।
Warned that the loss of life and severe trauma caused by attacks on hospitals, schools, places of refuge is utterly shocking, as is the devastation of critical civilian infrastructure in the country. The UN Refugee Agency, for its part, said that 5 million people have now fled Ukraine. More than 7 million are displaced within the country, and 12.65 million are estimated to be directly impacted by the war, stranded in a war zone, or unable to leave. Our humanitarian colleagues are also telling us that a new UN-led interagency humanitarian convoy has safely reached Chernihiv, a city in northern Ukraine that has been besieged until recently and is heavily impacted by the war. This is the first time the UN and our humanitarian partners have managed to deliver much needed assistance to people living in Chernihiv and nearby communities, and the fifth successful interagency convoy since the escalation of the hostilities. Today's convoy delivered 9 trucks of critical relief supplies for more than 13,800 people in Chernihiv that will be distributed by the Ukrainian Red Cross Society and their local partners. It includes food for 5,000 people, infant cereals for more than 1,600 children, plastic sheeting, jerry cans, blankets for 3,000 people, thermal blankets and solar lamps for about 2,500 people, and water supplies for more than 1,600 people. While these relief items will help alleviate the suffering of thousands of people in Chernihiv, it is still very much far from what is needed right now in Ukraine. The ongoing conflict is putting millions at risk of losing access to food, water, shelter, heating, and essential medicines. To address these massive and growing needs at the speed and scale required, we need constant, free, and sustained access. The main humanitarian challenge is to secure safe access in areas with ongoing fighting. We, along with our partners, still have not been able to reach areas where people are in desperate need of support, notably Mariupol and Kherson, despite extensive efforts and the ongoing engagement with the parties to the conflict. We are continuing our dialogue with both parties with the aim of urgently and immediately and consistently negotiating and facilitating the delivery of critical humanitarian assistance to the people who've been hardest hit by the conflict. For its part, the UN Population Fund warned that the war in Ukraine continues to cause terrifying suffering, destruction, and displacement, taking a disproportionate toll on women and girls. To respond to soaring humanitarian needs in the country, UNFPA is coordinating and bolstering life-saving sexual and reproductive health services and protection and response services for survivors of physical and sexual violence. The agency says more than 13 metric tons of reproductive health were delivered to 7 hospitals in Dnipro, Kharkiv, Kiev, Zaporizhia, and an additional 27 tons of critical reproductive health supplies and medicines have arrived in Ukraine and will be distributed to maternity hospitals in Chernihiv, Sumy, Kherson, Mykolaiv, and 4 more cities to meet the needs of more than 1.5 million people. And another 41 metric tons are scheduled to arrive later in May. UNFPA is also distributing dignity kits and essential items to support women's hygiene. On the funding part, to date, 68% of the $1.1 billion requested by the initial humanitarian flash appeal has been funded. The continuing increase in humanitarian needs has pushed us to revise the amount requested to $2.24 billion, and we urge donors to convert their generous pledges into real cash, and others who have not pledged to do so as well. As you know, the Security Council held a meeting on Ukraine yesterday afternoon. Briefing council members were the head of the International Organization for Migration, Antonio Vitorino, and he said that he saw firsthand the price that civilians are paying for the conflict, and he said he was also very much alarmed by reports of discrimination and xenophobia against third country nationals fleeing Ukraine. For her part, the Deputy High Commissioner for Refugees, Kelly Clemens, called on Security Council members to put aside their differences and find a way to end the war. Also want to flag that this morning the Security Council held close consultations on the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, otherwise known as MINURSO. Staffan de Mistura, the personal envoy for Western Sahara, briefed, as well as Alexander Ivenko, the special representative of the Secretary General and head of MINURSO. They both briefed via VTC. And this afternoon, Caroline Ziade, the new special representative for this Secretary General in Kosovo and head of the interim administration there, mission there, will brief Council on the situation in Kosovo. She's expected to urge Pristina and Belgrade to engage constructively and more actively in the EU-facilitated dialogue. And we'll share those remarks with you. Our colleague Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General, left for Washington this morning to attend the 2022 spring meetings of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, as well as related events. She'll be back here tomorrow. As you will have seen, we issued a statement about an hour ago on Jerusalem, in which the Secretary General said he remains deeply concerned by the deteriorating situation in Jerusalem, particularly incidents in and around the holy sites. He is actively engaged with leaders to do all they can to lower tensions, avoid inflammatory action and rhetoric, and to restore calm. The provocations must stop immediately, he said. The ongoing holidays for Muslims, for Jews and Christians should be a period of peace and reflection, not incitement to violence. The Secretary General reiterates that the status quo at the holy sites in Jerusalem must be upheld and respected. He is committed to supporting Palestinians and Israelis to resolve the conflict on the basis of relevant UN resolutions, international law, and bilateral agreements. The Secretary General also reaffirmed the need to avoid the excessive use of force and to stop all unilateral measures like settlements and evictions that can undermine the two-state solution.